About 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day, Katie Greifeld and Isabelle Lee. She's in for Romaine Bostick. Here to help take us through the closing bell, it's a global simulcast. We're joined now by Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. We bring together all of our various audiences, Carol, to talk about yet another rally when it comes to these equity markets.
Yeah.
Back-to-back gains here in a big way.
Yeah, right. Pretty significant, holding on to these gains with just the last few minutes of trading. So I'm thinking about the Nasdaq 100, what we're looking at 10 straight days of wins for that average, and that would be its longest streak of gains since 2021. So yeah, pretty impressive. Nasdaq 100 alone up almost 1.8% just today.
What's not higher today is oil, but still high on the year, about 60% higher, Isabelle, on the year. Interesting to see where we've recovered in the U.S. equities, where we were before the war started on February 28th, yet oil is still significantly higher, 56% higher for Brent and 60% higher for WTI. So we're not seeing much relief there.
Not much relief there, but again, back to stocks, I just can't believe it. The recovery has got a lot of investors really shaking their heads in this belief, because this will have a huge impact on consumers, on energy prices, and even just on our day today. We're in the thick of earnings season, and we're going to raise the prospect of another wave of military spending. So the world is quite unstable if you think about it.
Yeah, certainly. Stability when you take a look at these equity markets, though, I do think that's a really interesting point, Tim, especially when you think about energy stocks wiping out their gains, even though oil much higher than it was 6 weeks ago. But in any case, you take a look at the S&P 500 right now, it's going to finish the day about 1.2% higher. We're not going to quite close at that record high, but we're pretty dang close on the S&P 500. The Nasdaq higher by nearly 2%. The Dow, it's higher by about 0.7%. And then you take a look at the small caps. A lot of breadth in this market, Carol. The small cap index, the Russell 2000, going to close out the day higher as well.
Yeah, right across the board. I'm going to go back to the big caps right now, S&P 500. And we have about 288 names to the upside at the close here in that average. 211, Isabelle, to the downside, and 4 unchanged.
Let's now take a look at IMAP. You can see it's really mostly green on the screen. The biggest gainers there, technology, communication services, up by more than 2%. And energy, I'm going to give this to Katie. It's down by 1.5%, the biggest loser there. Consumer staples almost made it to the green. It's almost flat, I would say. It's 0.01% in the red.
All right, guys, let's go to some of the individual gainers, if I may. Let's talk about airlines. This was definitely a bunch of outperformance in the Tuesday trade. We've got a few things up there for you who are watching. S&P 500 Airline Index, the Super Composite Airlines Index, all 9 names are higher. But for the group overall, you're looking at a more than 5.25% gain there. JetBlue was an outperformer in that average. It was up about 17%. But I want to talk about American, which was up about 8% in today's trade, and then you had United up about 2%. American and United, United Chief Executive Officer Scott Kirby floating a possible combination between the two airlines, according to people familiar with the conversation. This is a Bloomberg exclusive, and Kirby apparently pitching the idea to senior government officials, though it's unclear if any overtures have since been made or if any actual process is underway to explore a deal, according to those in the know. Spokesman for United declined comment, as did reps for American Airlines. And I just wanted to bring up JetBlue, because let's not forget, it was in late March that Semaphore reported that JetBlue was exploring selling itself to a competitor, citing folks familiar, including a possible deal with United, Alaska Air, or Southwest. JetBlue, listen, they've tried to do some deals before. It hasn't worked out, but nonetheless, investors looking very, very closely and bidding up this sector overall. And then I just want to mention Amazon and Globalstar. Globalstar rallying in a big way in today's session. That stock up about 9.6% at the close, as Amazon agreed to acquire Globalstar for $90 a share in cash and stock, or roughly $11.6 billion deal overall that would expand the services of its satellite system. and that represented about a 117% premium over Globalstar's price from late October. And this deal expected to close in 2027, and there's more on the Bloomberg. Highly recommend you read these stories, but you even saw Amazon up today, up about 3.8% in the Tuesday trade.
Yeah, we're going to be speaking to Bruce Einhorn about this in just a minute. He covers space from our Princeton bureau. In the meantime, some stocks that were on the decline today. A couple banks, including Wells Fargo, that company fell short across its primary income streams in the first quarter. Shares fell today by 5.7%. Net interest income and non-interest income lower than analyst estimates. Net interest income margin narrowed to 2.47% in the first quarter. Wells Fargo shares slumped with the company's results unchanged. 2026 guidance likely to cause modest disappointment and weigh on the bank shares. You guys, I know, spoke to the company's CFO.
We did.
Mike Santomassimo said that consumer spending remains resilient despite the effects of higher gas prices. So, okay, good news on the consumer front.
I'm glad to know you were watching, Tim.
Yeah, I was watching, of
and
course.
Listening, yeah.
No, we have impossible for me to watch while I was doing my show, to be honest.
Right, for sure.
So, JP Morgan shares also fell today, 0.8% to the downside. The company did lower its full-year net interest income guidance to about $103 billion. Jamie Dimon noted that the U.S. economy remained resilient in the quarter, but there is an increasingly complex set of risks. Traders, though, did post their highest ever quarterly revenue in the first 3 months of the year, record stock trading results. And finally, shares of CarMax took a hit today. This as investors weren't convinced about its turnaround strategy of cutting vehicle prices while increasing cost savings in a competitive market. The company has to lower its used car prices to attract customers and offset the cuts by reducing costs in areas such as logistics. That's according to the company's new CEO, Keith Barr. CarMax shares were down all day today and ended up closing down 15%.
All right, let's take a look at what we saw in the bond market today. And it was a big rally across the curve, a big rally in relative terms. You saw yields declining by about 4 basis points, 4 to 5 basis points when it comes to the 10-year yield. We know that at 8:30 this morning, we got milder than expected PPI for the month of March. So maybe a bit of a sigh of relief when it comes to the bond market, though similar to what we're seeing in Brent and crude prices, yields are much higher over the past 6 weeks versus where we started from.
All right, guys, we want to get to some stories that are definitely on our radar. And this is interesting. If you think about folks like Mark Zuckerberg did it, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Michael Dell, Jack Dorsey. I mean, these are college kids. What we're finding today is that college kids are launching startups as the job market tightens. Whether or not they leave school altogether, what we're noticing is that we're seeing a lot more of this happening. And you're even seeing venture capitalists kind of seeking these folks out.
You mentioned a lot of names that people know, Carol, but I mean, the way it works is with startups is there's a high rate of failure. And there are a lot of people out there whose names we don't know as a result of starting companies because they weren't successful in doing this. But I think
they were young.
Sorry?
They were young. They probably bounced back.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it speaks to a couple things. One, the tight job market that Carol talked about, but two, also the cost of college. And it used to be this guaranteed path of actually getting to a well-paying job. But as costs have gone up and there's less of a guarantee that you can actually stand out in the job market in a situation like this, then, maybe people do go it alone more often.
Yeah.
It's also easier to start startups now because of AI. I feel like I have more and more friends saying, I made an app. And I'm like, wow, I just use apps. I don't make apps.
I made dinner.
Yeah, right.
It's like,
I took a nap.
or not.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, to Isabelle's point, whether or not the ubiquity of AI, whether we see an uptick in young kids going out and starting their own businesses, which we know that has been around for a while. But I want to talk about another very interesting story on the Bloomberg terminal today, and that is a mixed martial arts company that's linked to Donald Trump Jr. It's looking to win government contracts by teaching fighting techniques to military and police forces. Mixed Martial Arts Group. It's based in Australia, and it has some pretty big investors, including Trump Jr.
This is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that, at least from a military perspective, in terms of the people in the military right now, and what quote unquote fighting is, not a lot of it is hand-to-hand combat.
No.
A lot of it's done behind a computer screen. It's done with the work of intelligence analysts. It's done when it comes to actually controlling unmanned aerial vehicles. So
It's not bare knuckle boxing here?
no, it's not. This is interesting, though.
It makes sense, but also it's shocking. So I don't know what to make of it.
And no conflict of interest,
There is that.
some might say. Anyway, it's a fascinating story. Annie Massar wrote it of Bloomberg News, so check it out on the Bloomberg. It's among our most read